Chapter 1. 𝐬𝐻 𝐸𝐿. Parker stepped off the bus and inhaled the crisp, autumn air of Willow Creek. The scent of fallen leaves mixed with the faint aroma of baked bread from the bakery down the street, and it made her chest tighten with a strange mix of longing and unease. Years had passed since she had left this town, and yet everything looked both the same and different at once. The streets were quieter than she remembered, but the familiar brick buildings and storefronts held the same charm she had adored as a teenager. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder and began walking toward her grandmother's house, each step stirring memories she had tried to push away. The path to her grandmother's home wound past the park, where she had spent countless afternoons laughing with friends and stealing glances at Luke Bennett. She remembered the way the sunlight had caught in his hair and the mischievous smile that had made her heart skip a beat. Her stomach fluttered now as if no time had passed, but a part of her wanted to turn back and retreat into the anonymity of the city she had left behind. When she reached the front porch, the old wooden steps creaked just as they always had. Her grandmother's door opened before she could knock, and a warm smile greeted her. Emily dropped her bag and embraced the familiar warmth, feeling the weight of the years melt for a moment. "You're home, my dear," her grandmother said, her voice soft and comforting. Emily nodded, unable to speak at first, as she took in the familiar scent of lavender and fresh linens that had always made this house feel like a sanctuary. After settling in and unpacking her belongings, Emily wandered through the house, her fingers brushing along the walls where pictures of family and friends lined the shelves. Every photograph told a story of the life she had left behind and reminded her of the love and happiness that had once surrounded her. Yet there was an ache in her chest as she thought of Luke and the unfinished chapter they had shared. She wondered if the town she had once called home could offer her more than nostalgia. She wondered if she could forgive herself for leaving, and if the past could ever truly be reconciled. As the sun dipped behind the rolling hills, casting a golden glow over the town, Emily stood by her grandmother's window and looked out at the streets she had once known so well. Somewhere along these familiar paths, memories lingered and hearts waited. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself that this time she would not run. This time she would face the past, whatever it held, and perhaps find a new beginning where old wounds could finally heal. The town seemed to hold its breath with her, as if aware of the possibilities that the evening air carried. Emily knew the days ahead would be filled with both comfort and challenge, laughter and perhaps even heartache. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope flicker in her chest, and she allowed herself to imagine a life where the love she had once known could find its way back to her. Chapter 2. A familiar facade. Next morning, Emily decided to visit the small cafe at the center of town, hoping a cup of coffee and the hum of quiet chatter might help her feel grounded. The bell above the door chimed softly as she stepped inside, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries immediately wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. She scanned the room, recognizing a few familiar faces from her teenage years, but her attention was caught by a figure behind the counter. Luke Bennett stood there, wiping a glass with a towel, and for a moment Emily felt her heart stall. His presence was commanding yet effortless. The same boyish charm she remembered from years ago now softened into the calm confidence of a man who had stayed and built a life in the town they had both called home. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to shift, as if the air had thickened with all the unspoken words between them. Luke's expression flickered with surprise, quickly followed by a guarded smile. "Emily Parker," he said, his voice steady, but layered with a hint of disbelief. "I didn't expect to see you here." Emily's throat tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times, yet reality felt heavier, charged with emotions she had tried to bury. "I just got back," she replied softly, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm here to take care of my grandmother." Luke nodded, leaning casually against the counter, but not letting go of her gaze. "That's good. I'm glad you're back. Willow Creek hasn't been the same without you." There was an awkwardness in his words, a polite distance that barely masked the undercurrent of something more. Emily felt a warmth in her chest at his words, and yet a pang of sadness that so much time had passed between them. They talked for a few minutes, exchanging updates on mutual friends and the changes in town. The conversation was light, careful, and yet every pause carried weight. Emily noticed the subtle way Luke's eyes softened when he laughed and the slight tension in his jaw when he avoided certain topics. She realized that beneath the cordial conversation, there were layers of history, lingering feelings, and unresolved emotions waiting to be acknowledged. When Emily finally stood to leave, Luke offered a small smile, a mix of hope and hesitation. "Maybe we'll run into each other again," he said, his tone casual yet intentional. Emily nodded, feeling her heart flutter with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years. She stepped back into the sunlight, the warmth on her face mirroring the mixture of anxiety and anticipation in her chest. As she walked down the familiar streets, Emily found herself replaying every detail of their encounter. She thought about the man Luke had become, the life he had built, and the connection that had never truly faded. A part of her wondered if returning to Willow Creek was not just about caring for her grandmother, but also about finding the pieces of herself she had left behind. And deep down, she felt the stirrings of a hope she had almost forgotten, the fragile yet persistent possibility that some loves were meant to be rediscovered. Chapter 3. Old wounds. That evening, Emily sat on the porch of her grandmother's house, the soft glow of the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The quiet of Willow Creek was comforting, yet it gave her mind space to wander, and she found herself thinking about the past she had tried to leave behind. She remembered the day she had left town, the arguments, the misunderstandings, and the painful choice to chase a future that seemed brighter beyond the small town limits. Her chest ached with the memory of leaving Luke behind, of walking away from someone who had meant more to her than she had allowed herself to admit. Luke had stayed, and she knew he had endured the emptiness her absence had left. She could imagine him in the hardware store, interacting with the townspeople with his steady charm, but always carrying the quiet weight of what had been lost between them. Emily wondered if he had ever truly forgiven her for leaving, if he had moved on, or if he had silently hoped that one day she would return. The thought made her heart tighten and her stomach flutter with a mix of guilt and longing. Across town, Luke closed the shop for the evening and leaned against the counter, thinking about Emily. Her sudden return had thrown him off balance in ways he hadn't expected. He remembered their last conversation before she had left, the unresolved words, the hurt in both their eyes, and the dreams they had once shared that had been left incomplete. Luke knew he had been stubborn and protective of his own pride, but he also knew that part of him had never stopped loving her. He questioned whether Emily's return was temporary, or a chance to rebuild something he had once cherished deeply. The memories of their teenage years came rushing back, the laughter shared in secret corners of the park, the late-night conversations under starlit skies, the shy touches that had felt like promises too fragile to speak aloud. Emily had been his world in those days, and even now, years later, the thought of her brought both warmth and pain. Luke sighed, trying to push away the vulnerability that her presence now stirred within him. He realized that their feelings had never truly disappeared. They had merely been buried under time, distance, and misunderstandings. Emily turned her gaze to the horizon. The town bathed in the soft glow of dusk. She knew that rekindling a connection with Luke would not be simple. The past had left scars, and both of them carried regrets and fears that would not vanish overnight. Yet, as she considered the life she had returned to, the familiar streets, the warmth of her grandmother's home, and the presence of the man she had once loved, a quiet hope began to bloom. Perhaps Willow Creek had not just welcomed her home. Perhaps it had offered her the chance to heal, to forgive, and to rediscover the love she had left behind. Luke closed the shop, stepping into the evening air, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine walking beside Emily again, sharing simple moments, and slowly rebuilding trust and connection. He knew that the road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges and the remnants of old wounds. But he also felt a spark of something he had thought long extinguished, Both of them carried the past with them, but maybe, just maybe, that past could guide them toward a future neither had dared to hope for until now. Chapter 4. Small-town life. Feed days in Willow Creek settled into a gentle rhythm, a pace that felt both comforting and unfamiliar to Emily. Each morning she walked down the quiet streets to pick up groceries or run errands, greeting neighbors who remembered her from years ago. Their warm smiles and friendly chatter reminded her of the sense of community she had once taken for granted, and she felt a quiet satisfaction in being part of it again. Yet amid the familiar faces and routines, her thoughts often drifted to Luke, and she realized how deeply his presence still lingered in her life. Emily found solace in helping her grandmother with household tasks, preparing meals, and tidying the garden. Every corner of the home carried echoes of the past, and the act of tending to it grounded her in a way she hadn't experienced in years. While she worked, her mind wandered to the park, where she had spent long summer afternoons with friends, to the old library, where she had studied late into the evenings, and to the streets she had walked countless times with Luke by her side. The memories were bittersweet, a mixture of joy and the ache of what had been lost. Meanwhile, Luke noticed Emily's presence in town more and more. At first, he had simply seen her from a distance, a familiar figure moving through the streets he had known all his life. Gradually, he found himself making excuses to pass by the cafe or the hardware store where he could catch a glimpse of her. He observed her carefully, noticing the way she laughed softly to herself when she thought no one was watching, the careful way she treated the town's residents with kindness, and the way her eyes carried a mixture of curiosity, caution, and longing. Each detail reminded him of the girl he had once loved, and the woman she had become. Emily and Luke's paths began to cross more naturally. In brief encounters at the market, during town events, and even in quiet moments on the streets, each meeting carried a tension, both delicate and charged, a mix of familiarity and restraint. Emily noticed the small gestures Luke made, the way he held doors for others, the way he offered help without being asked, and she realized how much he had grown, remained the same person she had admired in her youth. The memories of their shared past intertwined with the present, creating a tapestry of emotions that was both comforting and overwhelming. Emily began to feel the subtle tug of her heart toward Luke, a feeling that grew stronger with each encounter. She found herself thinking of him in quiet moments, wondering if he remembered the promises they had made in their youth, and if he had ever imagined her returning. Luke, too, felt the stirrings of old emotions, a gentle pull towards someone who had once been the center of his world. Neither spoke of their feelings outright, but the unspoken connection between them was palpable, weaving itself into the rhythm of small-town life. As Emily walked home one evening, the streets bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun, she realized that Willow Creek had begun to feel like more than just a place from her past. It was a town filled with memories, with opportunities for growth, and with the possibility of rediscovering love. She felt a quiet sense of anticipation, the awareness that the days ahead might hold more than just comfort and routine. Somewhere in the familiar streets and among the people she had once known, Emily sensed that the heart of the town held a chance for renewal, for laughter, and perhaps for the rekindling of a love that had never truly faded. Chapter 5. Unexpected help. Home. Crisp Saturday morning. Emily was busy in her grandmother's kitchen, preparing for the town's annual harvest festival. She moved between chopping vegetables, arranging flowers, and checking lists, trying to keep everything organized, but the task felt overwhelming. Her grandmother had always managed these events with ease, but now it was Emily's responsibility to ensure that everything ran smoothly. The weight of it pressed on her, and she felt a pang of frustration at her own inexperience. Just as she was reaching for a basket of apples, it slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. Emily bent down to gather them, muttering under her breath, and realized with a sigh that this was only the beginning of her challenges for the day. That was when Luke appeared in the doorway, holding a crate of freshly baked pies and a friendly, easygoing smile. "Need a hand?" he asked casually, but Emily could hear the warmth and concern in his voice. Relief washed over her as Luke stepped inside, kneeling to help pick up the apples. The ease with which he moved through the kitchen, the natural way he offered assistance without hesitation, reminded Emily of the countless times he had quietly supported her in the past. They worked side by side, laughing over minor mishaps, exchanging gentle teasing remarks, and feeling a subtle connection begin to reweave itself between them. Each shared smile and glance carried the weight of years, and Emily felt her heart lift despite the chaos surrounding them. After they finished tidying the kitchen, Luke helped her carry baskets and decorations to the town square. On the walk, they talked about trivial matters at first, sharing updates about friends and the town's changes. Slowly, their conversation shifted to memories of festivals past, the pranks they had pulled as teenagers, and the small traditions that made Willow Creek feel like home. Emily noticed how Luke's laughter had softened, how his presence seemed to steady her, and how naturally they fell into a rhythm together, as if no time had passed at all. As the day unfolded, Luke stayed to help with setup, arranging tables, hanging lights, and checking details alongside Emily. At one point, a sudden gust of wind blew a banner off its hooks, and Luke instinctively reached out to catch it. Their hands brushed, lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and Emily felt a familiar warmth spread through her. She realized that the old barriers, the distance and caution she had built, were starting to crumble in the face of genuine connection and shared effort. By the time the festival began, the town square was transformed into a vibrant scene of autumn colors, laughter, and music. Emily and Luke stood back for a moment, taking in their work, their eyes meeting with a shared sense of accomplishment and quiet joy. Emily felt the stirrings of hope and excitement, recognizing that these moments of collaboration and closeness were more than just coincidence. They were small steps toward rebuilding trust, friendship, and perhaps something deeper. As the first townspeople arrived, greeting them with smiles and eager chatter, Emily and Luke exchanged a glance filled with unspoken understanding. The day had begun with a simple act of helping, but it had blossomed into an opportunity to reconnect, to see each other in a new light, and to rediscover the comfort of companionship. Emily felt a sense of possibility settle over her, a belief that perhaps Willow Creek was not only a place to care for her grandmother, but also a place where hearts could mend, and old loves could find their way back. Chapter 6. Rekindled. Memorious Town Festival was in full swing, and Willow Creek buzzed with life as children ran between stalls. The scent of caramel apples and roasted corn filled the air, and the soft strumming of a guitar drifted from the bandstand. Emily wandered among the booths, taking in the familiar sights and sounds, feeling a warmth in her chest. She hadn't realized she had missed so much. The laughter of neighbors and friends stirred long-forgotten memories, and she couldn't help but think about the times she and Luke had attended these festivals as teenagers, sneaking candy and sharing shy smiles in corners away from prying eyes. She turned a corner and spotted Luke arranging pumpkins near the craft tent. The sight of him moving among the decorations, focused yet relaxed, brought an involuntary smile to her face. He looked up as if sensing her gaze, and their eyes met across the bustling crowd. Luke's expression softened instantly, the brief surprise giving way to a gentle warmth that made Emily's heart skip a beat. He waved slightly, a small gesture, and she felt the pull of familiarity and history drawing them together once again. As Emily approached, they fell into easy conversation, laughing about minor mishaps and reminiscing about past festivals. Luke recounted a story about a pumpkin carving contest they had both entered as teenagers, remembering how Emily had insisted on adding a whimsical twist to her design while he had carefully carved a perfect pumpkin. Emily laughed at the memory, the sound bright and carefree, and felt the tension that had hovered between them begin to melt. They shared stories of friends they had lost touch with, of pranks and secret adventures, and with each recollection, the invisible threads of connection wove themselves tighter. Luke noticed the subtle changes in Emily as well. The way she carried herself now with quiet confidence, the gentle kindness she extended to everyone around her, and the spark in her eyes that had not faded despite the years apart. as they worked together to set up decorations, hang banners, and help at the booths. The physical closeness allowed for small, meaningful touches, a brush of hands, shared laughter, and glances that lingered longer than necessary. Every interaction reminded them of the bond they had once shared and the depth of emotion that had never truly left their hearts. Later, as the sun dipped low in the sky, they found a quiet moment by the edge of the festival near the small pond that reflected the glowing autumn colors. The laughter and music of the festival felt distant here, replaced by a peaceful intimacy. Emily spoke softly about the fears she had carried during her time away, of the mistakes she had made, and the longing she had felt for a life she once knew. Luke listened, his own voice tinged with honesty as he shared his regrets and the quiet hope he had held for her return. The conversation opened doors they had both kept closed for too long, allowing them to confront lingering insecurities and embrace vulnerability. For the first time since Emily's return, they acknowledged that their feelings had never truly disappeared, and that the connection they shared could be nurtured again. The golden light of dusk settled over them, casting a soft glow on their faces, and in that moment, Emily felt a sense of calm certainty. Willow Creek was not just a place of memories, it was a place where hearts could reconnect, where old love could be rediscovered, and where the future held promise if they chose to embrace it together. As they walked back toward the center of town, the festival lights twinkling around them, Emily and Luke felt a quiet anticipation, an unspoken understanding that this was only the beginning. The past had resurfaced, but so had the hope of something new. Every shared smile, every gentle touch, and every whispered word carried the promise of rekindled memories and the possibility of love restored. Chapter 7. Misunderstandings. Days after the festival carried a sweet rhythm of closeness between Emily and Luke. They found themselves running into each other more often, sharing small moments that felt both natural and electrifying. Emily enjoyed the simple comfort of Luke's presence, the way he could make her laugh with a glance, and the quiet understanding that seemed to pass between them without words. Luke, in turn, felt a sense of warmth and familiarity he hadn't realized he had been missing so profoundly. It was easy to forget the years apart when they were together, as though the town itself had paused to give them this second chance. But even in the warmth of rekindled connection, small cracks began to appear, subtle at first but impossible to ignore. One afternoon, while Emily was helping set up a charity event at the community center, she overheard a conversation between Luke and one of his friends. The words were casual, harmless even, yet Emily misinterpreted them. Luke had been talking about a new woman he had met briefly while doing business in the neighboring town, mentioning her in passing. Emily's heart sank at the thought that Luke might have moved on or had romantic interests she hadn't anticipated. She withdrew slightly, masking her hurt behind polite smiles and an air of composure, but the tension was palpable. Luke noticed the change immediately, sensing her distance, but unaware of the reason. He tried to bridge the gap with jokes and casual conversation, but Emily's laughter felt forced, and her eyes avoided his. A simple touch on the arm, which would have previously sparked warmth and reassurance, now left her with a pang of doubt and fear. The misunderstanding, though small and easily clarified, hung between them like a shadow, making every interaction more fragile and cautious. Later that evening, Emily sat in her grandmother's living room, turning over the incident in her mind. She berated herself for jumping to conclusions, knowing deep down that Luke's intentions were likely innocent, but the fear of reopening old wounds and risking heartbreak made it hard to trust her own judgment. She remembered the pain of leaving Willow Creek and the years she had spent wondering if she had made the right choices, and she felt vulnerable in ways she hadn't anticipated. The walls she had begun to lower with Luke's gentle presence instinctively rose again, protective and defensive. Meanwhile, Luke wrestled with confusion and concern. He could sense Emily's distance and the subtle change in her demeanor, but he didn't understand why she was pulling away. His thoughts circled, filled with worrying and self-reproach, as he tried to determine what he might have done to cause her discomfort. He realized that the foundation of trust they were slowly rebuilding was delicate, and he feared that if he didn't act carefully, he might lose the fragile connection they had begun to restore. The misunderstanding lingered, testing their patience, communication, and emotional resilience. Both Emily and Luke recognized that addressing the situation required honesty, courage, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable feelings. It was a reminder that even in the gentlest of romances, old insecurities and miscommunications could create barriers that must be navigated with care. As night fell over Willow Creek, both of them were left reflecting on the delicate balance of love, trust, and vulnerability, realizing that the path to a second chance was not without its trials. Chapter 8. Heart to Hearth. Next afternoon, Emily decided she could no longer let the tension between her and Luke linger. She found him at the park, sitting on a warm wooden bench beneath the old oak tree where they had spent countless afternoons as teenagers. The sight of him brought a rush of memories and a pang of longing, but she steeled herself, determined to speak honestly. She approached slowly, her heart pounding in her chest, and Luke looked up immediately, sensing the seriousness in her demeanor. "Luke, we need to talk," Emily said softly, her voice carrying both resolve and vulnerability. He gestured to the bench, and they sat down side by side, the space between them charged with anticipation. For a moment, neither spoke, allowing the rustling leaves and distant laughter of children in the park to fill the silence. Emily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, and finally began to speak, sharing the fears and doubts that had been building inside her since she returned. "I heard something the other day, and I assumed the worst," she confessed, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I let my insecurities take over, and I pulled away from you. I'm sorry, Luke. I shouldn't have doubted you, especially after everything we've shared already." Luke reached out, gently covering her hands with his touch warm and steady. "Emily, I understand," he said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "I never meant to give you any reason to doubt me. You mean more to me than words can say, and seeing you hesitate hurts me too. We've both made mistakes in the past, but that doesn't mean we can't move forward." The honesty between them opened a space for vulnerability they had felt in years. Emily spoke of the guilt and regret she had carried since leaving Willow Creek, of the nights she had wondered if she had ruined their chances forever. Luke shared his own fears, the quiet longing for her return, and the way he had guarded his heart, afraid of being hurt again. As they spoke, the walls they had built around their emotions slowly crumbled, replaced by a deep sense of understanding and mutual respect. They reminisced about their shared past, laughing softly at the memories of silly pranks, secret hideaways, and shy glances that had once been their only language. The conversation turned to the present, and they began discussing what they wanted for the future, exploring possibilities they had once thought impossible. Luke's eyes softened as he looked at Emily, seeing not just the girl he had loved, but the strong, compassionate woman she had become. Emily felt a sense of peace in his gaze, a reassurance that their hearts were aligned and ready to face whatever came next. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park, they sat in comfortable silence, letting the weight of their words settle and the truth of their feelings sink in. Emily rested her head briefly on Luke's shoulder, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she had been missing. In that quiet moment, they both understood that their second chance was not only possible, but worth every effort, every fear, and every step they had taken to arrive here. By the time they rose from the bench, the air between them was lighter, filled with renewed hope and tender anticipation. The heart-to-heart had reminded them of the depth of their connection, the strength of their love, and the beauty of vulnerability shared between two people willing to trust again. As they walked back toward town, their hands brushed, lingering longer than necessary, a quiet promise that this time they would face the future together, without hesitation and without fear. Chapter 9. Taking a chance. The days following their heart-to-heart were filled with a gentle rhythm of rediscovery for Emily and Luke. They spent more time together, slowly rebuilding the connection that had once been interrupted by years apart. Walks through the town became a cherished routine. Whether it was sharing a coffee at the cafe, browsing through the small shops, or simply strolling along the familiar streets, letting conversation flow freely, every moment felt both comforting and exhilarating, as if they were learning to love each other anew while savoring the memories of what they had shared. Before Emily found herself noticing the little things about Luke that had always drawn her to him, the way his smile could light up a room, the easy kindness he extended to everyone he met, and the subtle humor that slipped into his conversation. Luke, in turn, was captivated by Emily's warmth and resilience, the gentle way she treated her grandmother, and the spark of curiosity and laughter she carried, even in mundane moments. These small details, once overlooked in their youth, now felt profound and precious, reminding them both of why their bond had endured even in absence. One afternoon, they decided to volunteer together at the town library, helping to organize a community reading event for children. This shared effort allowed them to work side by side, exchanging smiles, playful teasing, and quiet words of encouragement. Luke handed Emily stacks of books and teased her about her meticulous attention to detail, while Emily rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress a laugh. Their teamwork, effortless yet intimate, reminded them that love was often built in small gestures and acts of care, not just grand declarations. As the day progressed, they took a break outside the library, sitting on a bench under a large elm tree. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground, and the world seemed to pause around them. Emily turned to Luke, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and nervousness. "I've missed this," she said softly. "Missed being with you, even when I didn't realize how much I needed it." Luke reached for her hand, holding it gently but firmly. "I've missed you too," he admitted. "And now that you're here, I don't want to let go again. I don't want to waste another day pretending we're not meant to be together." His words were sincere, filled with the vulnerability and courage that had brought them to this point. Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but they were tears of relief and joy rather than sorrow. That evening, they attended a small community gathering, a celebration of the town's harvest and unity. As music played softly in the background, Luke extended his hand toward Emily with a shy, hopeful smile. She placed her hand in his, and together they swayed gently, lost in the rhythm of the moment. Around them, the town carried on in laughter and conversation, but for Emily and Luke, the world had narrowed to the space between their hands. The warmth of each other's presence, and the certainty that they were taking a step toward a future they both desired. As the night wore on, Emily realized that taking this chance with Luke required courage, honesty, and the willingness to embrace vulnerability once more. But with each shared glance, touch, and smile, she knew that the risk was worth it. Love had returned to Willow Creek, quiet and steadfast, and for the first time in years, Emily felt the thrilling promise of a life built together, where laughter, trust, and devotion could flourish in ways they had only dreamed of before. Chapter 10. A new beginning. Autumn had settled fully over Willow Creek, painting the town in warm shades of gold, amber, and crimson. Emily stood on the front porch of her grandmother's house, taking in the familiar streets that had once been the backdrop of her youth. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves and baked goods from the cafe, mingling with the faint aroma of wood smoke from chimneys. Everything felt alive and welcoming, a comforting reminder that she was truly home. She adjusted her coat, her heart fluttering with anticipation as she thought about the journey she had taken to arrive at this moment. Luke approached from the path, carrying a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers he had picked from the fields beyond town. He stopped when he saw her, smiling in that way that made Emily's chest tighten and her stomach flip with the same mixture of nerves and excitement she had felt as a teenager. "Emily," he said softly, his voice carrying warmth and sincerity, "I think this is exactly where we're meant to be." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and stepped toward him. "I've never felt more certain of anything," she replied. They stood together in silence for a moment, simply enjoying the presence of one another, feeling the weight of the past melt away in the quiet strength of the present. The town around them seemed to hum with life, as if acknowledging their reunion and the promise of love rekindled. They spent the morning walking hand in hand through the town square, greeting neighbors who had watched their story unfold with quiet encouragement. Each smile and word of congratulations reinforced the sense that their connection was not only personal, but intertwined with the fabric of the community that had shaped them both. Emily realized that Willow Creek was more than a homecoming. It was a place where love could flourish, where forgiveness could take root, and where second chances were not just possible, but celebrated. In the afternoon, Emily and Luke returned to her grandmother's house, where family and close friends had gathered for a small celebration. The table was laden with food, laughter filled the air, and the warmth of togetherness wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. Luke slipped his hand into Emily's, and she rested her head briefly against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the quiet promise of a shared future. Words were unnecessary. Their actions, glances, and intertwined fingers spoke volumes about commitment, trust, and enduring love. As the evening settled over Willow Creek, Emily and Luke stepped outside to watch the sunset over the hills. The sky blazed with brilliant hues, casting a golden light over the town that had witnessed both their separation and their reunion. Luke turned to Emily, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said softly, "No more running. This is our home, our life, together." Emily smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace and joy she had never known before. "Together," she echoed, letting the word settle in her heart. The past had taught them lessons, tested their patience, and challenged their hearts, but it had also brought them back to each other stronger and more certain than ever. In that moment, surrounded by the town that had shaped them, the family and friends who had supported them, and the love that had endured every trial, Emily knew that this was truly a new beginning. Willow Creek had given her a second chance, a place to belong, and a love worth cherishing for a lifetime. And as she held Luke's hand and watched the final rays of sunlight fade, she allowed herself to imagine a future full of laughter, shared dreams, and the quiet, enduring happiness of a love that had finally found its way home.